Hello, friends. This is Dorie Clark, and we are here with our weekly interview show for Newsweek. It is called Better, and we talk about how to improve our lives and careers. And today we're here with a special guest, Alisa Cohn. We're going to talk about how to learn to act like a leader. And Alisa is the author of a new book just released this week. It's called From Startup to Grown Up. Alisa, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Dorie, to have me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. We're so glad to have you. And if you're tuning in live, please feel free to type into the chat box and let us know who you are and where you're dialing in from. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to get your questions for Alisa. So, Alisa, your book is called From Startup to Grown Up. It is certainly for startup founders, but it's also for any leader that is looking to grow an organization and get better at what they do. And so my first question to you, you make an assertion, perhaps a controversial assertion in your book. You say leadership is an unnatural act. What do you mean by this?
Thank you, Dorie. I stand by my words. Leadership is an unnatural act. The truth is that we are not born knowing how to have difficult conversations or give difficult feedback, certainly to our friends. Also, when you're a leader, sometimes what you have to do is continue to praise and encourage someone, even when they are screwing up, because that is what's going to take to have them be confident. When you're a leader, you have to learn how to manage things like, sort of structures around the business. None of this we are born with. All of this we have to learn.
That's great. Well, it does sound sometimes counterintuitive, the act of what we have to do as leaders.
That's true.
So yes, this is great. Now, one of the things that is perhaps most hated in corporate life, but nonetheless seems to be necessary, is meetings. And I know you have talked a lot, both in your book and also, recently you were on the Tim Ferriss show talking about this. But how do we make meetings better? This is something that when you are talking to an average employee, probably one of their greatest complaints is, I can't get anything done because of all these meetings. So many people feel like they're a complete waste of time. Should we get rid of meetings? How do we actually fix this problem, Alisa?
Here's another controversial statement, Dorie. I love meetings. I love the potential of meetings. Meetings are gatherings. Meetings are times to bring everybody together and share what's going on and communicate to each other and bond people. The problem with meetings is that people don't think through enough. What is the purpose of this meeting? What are we here to accomplish? What is going to be done different at the end of the meeting than there is at the beginning of the meeting? And so if you would think through what is the goal and purpose of this meeting, and then design a structure to get there, and then end the meeting with my 3 questions, which is, what did we decide here? Who will do what by when? And who needs to know? Which helps you then make progress. If you will do that by way of preparation, you will have amazing meetings, and you will join me in my love for meetings.
Wow. Well, you're throwing down the gauntlet there, because I imagine there's a lot of skeptics out there that say, I don't know if I can ever come to love meetings, but we will give it a try. So thank you.
Try it.
Thank you for that, Alisa. We want to greet some of the great friends who are tuning in to join us live here. Thank you for being here. We have Marion from Atlanta. We have a LinkedIn user from England who's tuning in. Kathy's here from Boston. Alejandro's here from Austria. We've got Saul from Colombia, Brittany from North Carolina, Simone's in Toronto, Derek's also in Atlanta. You and Marion should hang out, obviously. Anita's in New York City, Stephen from Nairobi. We've got so many folks tuning in. Thank you for being here. And please type your questions into the chat box for Alisa Cohn. She is the author of the newly released book, From Startup to Grown Up. So, Alisa, in your book, you lay out a framework, a 3-part framework of how you can actually learn and grow as a leader. And it starts with managing yourself, which I think is interesting. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like and how we actually can manage ourselves as leaders? Or, I assume this is probably relevant for almost any professional as well.
Yes. Well, the truth is that if you think about managing yourself, it's like the first person you manage every day, the first person you lead every day is the one who wakes up in your pajamas. That means you. There's 2 aspects of that. First of all, get a handle on your triggers, the things that annoy you, your natural strengths, your natural swings, and you can activate your natural swing. That is good. But recognize what normally kind of triggers you and upsets you, and also notice where you sometimes overinvest. That will help you both modulate your sort of your the way you show up, kind of your reactions, and will also help you hire the right people to make up for your deficiencies. The second is that you always have to protect the asset, and the asset is you. And what that means is take care of yourself like an athlete. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And P.S., in any journey of leadership, it's actually a marathon made up of multiple sprints. So you've got to steel yourself for that journey, and you've got to take care of yourself by eating right, by having the right nutrition, and also by getting a handle on the voices in your head and making sure that you're speaking to yourself in a productive self-talk way.
I love that. That's very helpful, Alisa. I'm curious. I'm here actually in California at my very first in-person talk, in-person keynote, which is taking place right after this in Half Moon Bay. So it's an exciting kind of post-pandemic landmark that we're back speaking at conferences. I know you're preparing for an international trip. When you talk about how do you take care of yourself as a leader, you are a very busy person. You're in the midst of a book launch right now. What are the things that you personally are doing in terms of self-care and your routine to make sure that you're operating as well as possible?
Yes, thank you, Dorie. I've thought a lot about that, both in preparation for this time and in the middle of this time. Two things definitely come to mind. One is I've doubled down on sleep, getting enough sleep, getting into a good sleep hygiene. That is essential. And the second is I've been really focusing on my workouts, including the use of kettlebells, which I'm
it's that
obsessed
size?
with. No, this is my toy kettlebell to remind me that I love kettlebells. I could show you my other kettlebells in the corner over there, because during COVID, I created a little gym in my house. But the point is that everybody has to find the ways to move their body and then rest their body. And that is the combination of things that if you do nothing else, just do that, it's going to help you for your endurance during this time.
That sounds great. Well, thank you. We're here with Alisa Cohn. She's the author of the new book, From Startup to Grown Up. If you want to learn more about her, check out the book. You can go to alisacohn.com/startup. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly conversations, you can go to dorieclark.com, sign up, get a free self-assessment there, and you will get regular emails and reminders about these wonderful conversations. And we want to greet some of the great folks who are tuning in here who have joined us. We have Alessandra from Vancouver. Jillian's here from England. We have a LinkedIn user from Switzerland. Joe's here from Seattle. We have Patricia from Beverly Hills. We have Jackie from Yorkshire. We have Bidyashri from Amsterdam, and many more. We're so happy to have all of you. Please type your questions for Alisa Cohn into the chat box, and we'd love to hear what is on your mind. These are great conversations as we learn about how to become better leaders. Now, Alisa, the obvious situation, you were writing this book during the pandemic. It has now come out at this moment, this inflection point where maybe we're coming out of things. We're at least entering a more hybrid environment where people are no longer holding up so exclusively. What are your thoughts? If you are a leader, if you are managing other people, what do people need to be mindful of now in this liminal moment? And how has leadership changed during the pandemic?
That's a great question, Dorie. First of all, I love that you call this a liminal moment, right? We're sort of both still remote and also in the office, and we're doing this hybrid experiment. Just like at the beginning of the pandemic, you as a leader, really your role was to double down on caring about your people and really having your finger on the pulse. As we now come back to a different stage, I would say it's super important, just as important, to double down on figuring out how your employees are doing, how they're feeling, and to have a two-way dialogue. That is one thing as a leader that's a must right now. The second thing is, I think as leadership has changed, to your point, listen, we are in each other's homes now. This is my home. In the past, I might have been in a workspace, but we've gotten used to sort of the intimacy of being inside of people's homes. That has let the guard down in a very helpful way. I think the leader of the moment is allowed to be more vulnerable and has chinks in the armor. And even a little more, the word I don't love, but authenticity, which I really think is just about humanity. So I want to ask leaders to continue to be a little bit vulnerable and have that genuineness come out. But don't forget that you are the leader, and people still want certainty now more than ever. So your ability to also convey certainty and clarity is essential at this time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Alisa. Thank you for raising that. And we have some terrific questions coming in from folks who are tuning in. Thank you all for being here. I love this one. Dean is chiming in, Alisa, and Dean wants to know, for so many of us, we might start out, by acting like a leader, but at what point do you start being a leader? How do you think about these mental distinctions if we're entering a new role, or maybe we feel a little unself-confident in this new identity? What are your thoughts about acting like a leader versus becoming a leader?
Yeah, Dean, that's a very deep question. It reminds me of the Aristotle quote, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And so when you do these things over and over again, you grow your way into leadership. So I would say, in general, leadership is an inside out job and an outside in job. On the inside, you may feel severe self-doubt, imposter syndrome. That is normal for anyone who's stretching themselves. One thing you can do about that is activate your productive self-talk and actually create a highlight reel, a list of accomplishments, things that you're capable of, things you've done that you're really proud of. If you have them written down in front of your computer, you can regularly go back to them and remind yourself that you're actually a very capable person. That feeds the inside. The outside is the actions that you take every day that convince people around you that you're a leader. At some point, you actually may even convince yourself that you're a leader.
I love that. Yes, absolutely, Alisa. And another question came in from our great audience here, which I think is probably on the minds of a lot of people. I'll put it up here. So a LinkedIn user said, I can't wait to read your book, Alisa. I'm wondering if in the context of the Great Resignation, there's lots of new leaders and new teams. If you were a new leader, how can you balance learning the company ropes, but also being authoritative? What do you think? If you're just coming in, you're meeting people, maybe you're remote, maybe they're remote, maybe, how do you actually quickly come in and establish authority when you're just getting to know things and don't want to be too heavy-handed?
Totally. So I would say this, don't really focus on establishing authority, establish credibility. And maybe counterintuitively, the way to establish credibility is to ask sets of questions to your new employees or to your peers around you to get a lay of the land. So when you ask people, that the confident can afford to be humble. So what that means is you can ask people things like, what are some of the biggest problems around here? What are the things that everyone loves about this place or about this department? What are some things that you hope I will do? What are some things that you want to make sure I do not do? And who are the people around here who seem to know everything? If you ask questions like that to everybody, you will get a very quick lay of the land, and it will showcase your openness to learning. And if you do so in a way which is like super just normal, and I'm trying to get a lay of the land, it will also establish your credibility as a leader, especially when you take that information, synthesize it, feed it back to people, and then pick one thing to really activate from it.
Yeah, such a great tip, Alisa. It's something that I know that I practiced at least as best I could back in the days when I had a lot of employees working on political campaigns and managing the press offices. And that was always a really useful strategy. So thank you for that. And I'm seeing a great question coming in from Anil. He says, I'm always surrounded by people who are asking for decisions and advice. How can I make them more self-driven? This is the plaint of so many leaders that oftentimes people seem to come to us and need so much direction. We want them to fly from the nest and be able to become a little more independent, but sometimes it's just not happening. What should we do in a circumstance like that, Alisa?
Neil, I feel you. I feel you. So we teach people how to treat us. We teach people what they can expect from us. So I would come back to you, Anil, and I would ask you the question, when they come to you with their problems and their concerns and expect you to solve them, do you say, here's what you do, here's what you do? Or do you put it back on them? What do you think you should do? Or how would you approach this if I weren't here? You don't have to do that as like, in this, like, how would you do that? You don't have to do it in an accusing way, but you can do it in a very comfortable way, because that is helping them think for themselves and teaching them to fish proverbially. If you don't do that, what you end up doing is what you have, which is question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. Don't think about that. They bring you a question, thoughtfully unpack it together, and then invite them to think about how they can use what we just discussed to solve problems like this in the future. That will create the culture of them figuring it out for themselves more often.
Yeah, that's great. One trick that I often like to do, this past weekend, I was facilitating a mastermind with about 10 people, and oftentimes someone would posit a problem, and sometimes they kind of, would look to me to see what I was going to say. And I would often say, okay, I have thoughts that I'm excited to share, but first I'd like to see what other people in the group have to say, to give that space. So it's not always the leader sort of chiming in with the quote unquote correct answer.
Excellent. Yeah.
Thanks, Alisa. I love it. That's great. Well, so many questions pouring in. Thanks for this engaged audience. I love it. And if you have questions for Alisa Cohn, type them into the chat box. Of course, if you want to learn more about her book, go to alisacohn.com/startup. The book is From Startup to Grown Up. And of course, you can tune in and make sure you're never missing one of our weekly Newsweek episodes. Just go to DorieClark.com/LI. That stands for LinkedIn. And you can follow me there and subscribe to my newsletter to get regular updates about our fantastic guests. So a question, Alisa, that came in from Anna in New Hampshire. And she says that growth and success are just so strenuous these days, and it can make a lot of leaders feel anxious or unstable. Can you talk more? I know this is a popular topic for you and one you really like. Can you talk more about the mindset that you recommend in order to just feel more grounded as a leader in these anxiety-producing times?
Anna, I hear you. And I think anxiety, because like our lives are changing actually faster than we're used to. And so I think anxiety is kind of now a fact of life. So then how do you handle it in your mind is the mindset. I've talked about the 3 selves. And the 3 selves have to do with, first of all, self-awareness. What am I telling myself? What am I concerned about? Tuning into your thoughts and feelings. Number 2, self-compassion. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for what do you think you did, for your foibles, for being human. And then self-talk. Make sure that you're inserting productive self-talk into your mind's eye. That is what is going to help you with your anxiety. It's an inside job. P.S. The truth is you're probably doing better than you think.
I love it. That's always a useful reminder, Alisa. Thank you. So Marion in Atlanta wanted to chime in. He wants to know, Alisa, how can you be creative with team check-ins? When you're reaching out to your team, you're asking them for thoughts or feedback. How do you make sure that it doesn't seem rote, that it doesn't seem like, okay, I'm checking the leadership checklist here? How can you do it so that it's not actually turning people off in the process?
Well, listen, I have 2 ideas about that, but there are many ways you could make this a ritual. So when we're doing check-ins, what we're doing is we're trying to give them the context to tell us, to build rapport and to have a real bridge, and that they can tell us what is really going on. So the ways to do that are to activate some playfulness. You can have a regular team check-in. You could before every team meeting, you could have a team check-in just to ask a silly question. One of my clients did this, and they said, if you had a spirit vegetable, what's your spirit vegetable? Right? Or if you were a plushie toy, what would that plushie toy be? And people share remarkably very insightful points when you do fun, sort of check-ins like that. And it gives a sense of playfulness to an environment. You could also share strength stories. So one thing to say is that either you, if you're having a one-on-one with somebody, or as a ritual as a team, once a month or once a quarter, you could have everybody narrate a story of something they're proud of. And then you could articulate back to that person the strengths you hear they're using in that story. What that does is it raises the temperature of the meeting. It makes everything very warm. And then you can also say, hey, now that we're having a laugh, and now that we're, that I've sort of given you this praise, now it's like, how are you really doing? And then you could ask specific questions. What's really working, really? And what's not working for you? And when you have someone tell you something that actually surprises you and maybe even surprises them, then you've hit pay dirt.
Awesome. That's great advice, Alisa. Thank you. And we just have to compliment the use of emojis by some of our LinkedIn friends. Always a good idea to give carrots, including emoji carrots. We love that.
Yes. I think that's her spirit and her spirit vegetable.
I think that's totally right. Oh, yeah. I love that. Very good.
We know.
Well, Alessandra had a question for you, Alisa. She wants to know, would you share some thoughts about how to mitigate risk if you are somebody who's transitioning from having, a day job, you're employed by a company, to actually really beginning the startup founder journey? Your book is from
Yeah.
startup to grown up. So, okay, if you want to make it real and actually do the startup, it
Yeah.
might be, or it might feel at least like a risky proposition. What do you think people should actually be doing, Alisa?
It's a great question. So many very successful entrepreneurs have famously kept their day job as they have worked on their company nights and weekends for a period of time. Actually, I work with DraftKings, and DraftKings, who's had have a rocket ship, sort of success story. The founders, when they were first working, they worked in the bedroom of one of the founders' homes, right? So they were all together working on the startup for actually quite a long time before they finally took the leap and decided to do it full time. So you can get a lot done that way in terms of building your network, testing the market, beginning to build relationships if you're going to get funding. If you want to be a solopreneur, it's actually very helpful to start with clients nights and weekends to kind of get proof of concept and to get your reps in so you learn your craft. Basically, you can use your day job as a springboard, as a runway before you actually jump into the world of entrepreneurship to mitigate risk.
Yeah, that's great, Alisa. Similarly, in my first book, Reinventing You, I tell the story about a woman named Patricia Fripp, who was a hairdresser who wanted to
Yeah.
transition to becoming a professional speaker. And she had a 10-year lease on her salon. And so she gave herself a 10-year runway. It's pretty extreme, but impressive. And she just would funnel the profits from her business into training to be a professional speaker. And by the time she actually ended up making the full-time transition, it wasn't leaping off anything. She was able to saunter because she had more than replicated her income as a hairdresser with the new profession, because she had been reinvesting strategically in her learning and in her assets. So I think that's right on.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah, so some great questions coming in. I just want to thank Simone, who is writing down the key insights. She's the scribe for today, capturing some of the great reflections that you're sharing, Alisa, and then her take of them. So thanks for doing that, Simone, and always a great thing for other people as well. If there are key points, key insights, one of the best ways to really internalize it is to write them down and share them in the comments with others. So thanks for that. So a question came in from Umberto, Alisa. He wants to know, do you agree with the premise that you should hire for attitude rather than knowledge? This is kind of a perennial question in the world of corporate hiring. Where do you come down on this?
Well, Umberto, it's actually a great question. And I would say maybe the controversial answer is it depends. It really depends. When you, especially early stage, you can't hire for experience or knowledge necessarily because you're just trying to get people who will work with you. Attitude is the most important thing. When you are a later stage, you need someone with the knowledge, skills, and experience to scale from where you are to where you want to be. You need to find somebody who's done it before, who has the experience. However, you don't want to disregard attitude and culture as a key component of that hire. So in the end, I come down to it's not an either or, it's a both when you can get it.
Absolutely. Yes. I think so often we get ourselves in trouble by having a black and white worldview. So that's a great point. We're here with Alisa Cohn. She's the author of the new book, From Startup to Grown Up. You can learn more at alisacohn.com/startup. And the questions, Alisa, are pouring in. There was a great one here. I think a lot of people are probably nodding to themselves about this, from Ludmilla. And Ludmilla says, it's true that some of us are doing better than we think, but there are others who are really not. They think they're doing grand, but it's because they lack self-awareness and they are offended by feedback. All of us probably can think of one or two people like that. Do you have any tricks for helping the overconfident become more self-aware? What's your take?
Hi, Ludmilla. Thank you for that question. The answer is I would step back and I would say this, nobody can change somebody else. Somebody else has to want to change. You as a leader, you as a peer, you as a friend, right? You as a coach, you continue to offer the opportunities. You do offer the opportunities. So the way to capitalize on that is something is not going well. For example, this person has once again dominated an entire meeting, or this person has once again maybe had people leave them. Maybe they're a leader and they've had people leave their team. It might just be a conversation of first commiserating, like, I know, I'm so sorry that happened. And then it's really about asking, would you want me to share a few observations I have for you once you've already established kind of that rapport and that warmth environment? Environment and context is everything. At the end of the day, though, if somebody does not want to hear what you have to say, I quote Marshall Goldsmith, and I would say, if someone doesn't care, then you can just move on.
That's right. And we can also quote Marshall Goldsmith's favorite hand gesture, which is, oh, well.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome advice. Thank you, Alisa. And along a related line, we have so many good questions. Arturo is curious about how best to provide constructive feedback. So let's assume in this case that the person actually does want to hear it, but maybe it's some hard truths.
Yeah.
You hear sometimes, or you should have a feedback sandwich. That's a common piece of advice. But what do you think about this, Alisa?
Well, thank you, Arturo. In my book, From Startup to Grown Up, I have 14 scripts at the very end to help you deal with delicate conversations, difficult conversations, just like constructive feedback. And I would also say that at the end of my Tim Ferriss show, I did a 30-minute masterclass for everybody that you can go and listen to about specific scripts for delicate conversations, including so-called constructive feedback. One thing I would say is this. The reason we talk about the feedback sandwich, which is say something good, say what you really want to tell them, and say something bad, it is artless. It is technique. It is not really the way to do it. However, the reason it came into being is because you want to signal good intent. So constructive feedback starts way before you want to give the constructive feedback with positive feedback. Show them you're an ally. Praise them for what they're doing right. Show them what they're doing wrong in a comfortable way and help correct them. Then when you have to give difficult feedback, you're able to say, listen, I think that you're great. And I think that you have a lot of potential in, being a leader, for example. Truth is, the people around you find you very overly domineering and directive in how you speak to them. From me to you, that is not going to get you where you want to be. And I want to help you get where you want to be. So let's talk about how you need to adjust your tone and style as a leader so that they can be happy and that you can move on in your career. I think that was pretty good.
I think that's pretty good too. Thank you, Alisa. That's fantastic. And great folks here are chiming in with their own examples here. Scott had a great point. He's in the military. He says that there's actually a requirement for the junior leaders to reach out to the troops regularly and inject a bit of playfulness and fun into a check-in to turn something that could be robotic into something more personal. So good job, Scott. That sounds really awesome. Good job,
Scott.
Yeah, love that. And Alisa, we probably have time for one more question. And I think this one should go to Gabriel. And Gabriel wants to know, what if you're in an organization and the managers, the leaders are not setting the right boundaries? And so people from other departments are coming in and they're intervening. They're telling the junior employees, oh, do this, do that. And it's wreaking havoc because the boundaries have not been set. What do you do in a situation like that? Do you have thoughts?
I know. Welcome to being in a company, right? And I would just say it could be a little complicated. I think that if you are one of the direct reports and dealing with that with your manager, the way to do that is to have just a casual conversation, or not casual, but an informal conversation where you could say, listen, I'd like to address something. I'd like to share with you something that's going on in our department and see if we can talk through together some solutions. I want you to know that folks from the other departments are coming in and telling me and my peers what we should be doing. The thing is, it takes us off track for the assignments that we have been working on for you and the goals of our department. We don't always know how to handle it because they're peers at your level. Can we talk through your advice about how we can solve this together?
That's so good. Yes, you have to start a collaborative conversation,
right?
Because for a lot of people, they feel like if they're just unilaterally saying no, they don't have the authority to do it because the people might be more senior. So I love the collective problem solving. Thank you, Alisa.
Thank you, Dorie.
All right, amazing. Well, this is Dorie Clark. We have been here with our weekly Newsweek interview show, Better, and our guest this week is Alisa Cohn. Her book is From Startup to Grown Up. If you want to learn more about Alisa and her work, just go to her website. It's alisacohn.com. Her book is at alisacohn.com/startup. Again, if you never want to miss one of these You can follow me at LinkedIn here, dorieclark.com/LI. You can follow and subscribe. And thank you all for being here and joining us and for your wonderful questions. We will see you a week from today, next Thursday at 9 Pacific, 12 Eastern. Alisa Cohn, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dorie Clark. It was great to be here.